Hello, this is Douglas Rumbaugh, and welcome to part 3 of my Linux Back to Basics command line tutorial. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about working with files, and I think I'm going to be splitting this into two separate episodes. The first one, the one you're watching now, is going to cover manipulating files on the command line itself, and the second part is going to cover two very useful applications that usually are shipped with Linux that allow you to work with files as well. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, we are currently in my tutorial directory that has been highlighted over the course of this series thus far, and we have a couple text files in here. Now, earlier I showed you using ls how we can see what files are in the directory, but how do we see what is in the file? Well, two simple ways to get a taste of what's inside of that text file is the head and tail commands. Now what these commands are going to do is they print out the first several lines of the file and the last several lines respectively. So if I were to say head file1.txt, as you can see, it's going to display the first 10 lines of the file, and tail is going to do much the same, except with the last 10 lines. I got real creative and just put 1 through 30 on each line in the text file. Whoops. Okay. An interesting thing to note with head and tail, and it works the same for both of them, is that you can specify the amount of lines that you want it to display. Obviously it defaults to 10. However, if you do a head and then use the minus sign followed by an n, you can specify a number of lines, say 20. And it's going to print out the first 20 lines of the document. And tail is going to do much the same. Print out the last 20. So head and tail will give you an idea of what's inside of the text file, which is useful. I myself don't use them very frequently just because I find some of the methods that I'm going to touch on in the second half of this part a little more useful. But they are certainly handy if you don't want to actually open the file to just get a glimpse of what the file is about. Maybe to check to make sure it's the right file before you do something on it. Okay. Now I want to show you how you can actually manipulate the location of files. In the previous episode on directories, I mentioned as a means of renaming the move command, and I'll just say now that it works the same for files as it does for directories. So if you type in file1.txt, and we can just rename it file1, and the name has been changed. This little tilde thing here, that's just a auto backup generated by the text editor that I used. So ignore that. Actually, I'll just get rid of that using the remove command. Again, this is something that was mentioned briefly in the previous episode, but using remove, you can delete a file just by typing in the file name, and the file is now gone. Alright. The move command, in addition to being used to rename, it can be used to actually move files around. So if I wanted to put file1 in this test directory, I can just say move file1 is the first argument and the destination is the second argument, test. And then I have to, well, yeah, I can just say move test, I think, and it's going to detect test as a directory and put file1 in test. Simple enough. I can then move it back, and here you'll note I can just go ... and I will move it back to the parent. So the same sort of conventions in shorthand that work for the change directory command will work for move and really any other command that requires a path as an argument, a directory path. Okay, next is copy. Now copy is a lot like move, except it leaves the file where it is and puts a copy of it where you want it to go. So you can use copy to duplicate files within the same directory. So if I wanted to copy file1 and I want to do file1.backup, how do I do this? I think I usually use BKP. I don't know. The extensions don't really matter. You'll see I created a copy of it here, which using the head command, I'll show you file1's head, and the head for file1.bkp is the same, so they have the same contents in them. Copy does exactly what it says it's supposed to do. You can also copy files to move them, or to copy them into a different directory. So file1 is remaining here, and if I were to go into my test directory, you'll see it's there, and it is the same file. Or at least has the same 10 lines. First 10 lines, but trust me, it's the same file. Alright, one last thing that I want to touch on now. I could probably find a better place in this tutorial to stick it. Probably should have mentioned it earlier actually. And that is the abort. So I'm going to use this command called find. It's not super useful. I've never had to use it, but it's going to search every the way I formatted it up there. It's going to search, starting with the root file system, everything on the system for a file called test, which is obviously going to take quite some time. You can see here's the output of it searching each individual directory and file for it. I can abort this process by pressing Control and then C. And you'll see you have this !C, which means it just read a Control-C abort, and it stops what it's doing. You can use Control-C to tell the terminal to drop what it is doing pretty much any time that it's doing something. If you have a run out of control process, for example, you can use Control-C to do that, or to stop that. It's very useful when you're testing and debugging programs that you've written, or bash scripts that you've written. Plug for another series I have here on bash scripting right there. It's just generally a very useful thing to have. There are other control sequences that the terminal will interpret, but Control-C is definitely the most useful one. I'll cover all of them together at some point. Okay, so just a quick recap of what we've learned in this particular episode. You can use the move command to rename or to move a file by simply going input file, the original location of the file, and then the destination of the file, be it the new name of the file or a directory that you want to put the file into. CP works exactly the same way, except it leaves the original file untouched. You can use head and tail to look at the first 10 or last 10 lines of the text file, or you can use the -n option to specify any number of lines that you so desire, and that'll allow you to look into a file quickly, see what's in it. And of course, you can abort any running process by pressing Control and C. See, I'm aborting nothing. Alright, so that is all that I have for this part 1 of episode, I guess we're on episode 3. Tune in for part 2, where I will cover using a basic text editor known as Nano, and also another small application called Less. Well, Less, lowercase. So, as always, I would like to thank you for watching. If you have any comments or feedback, suggestions, what have you, please leave them in the comment section below. I will do my best to get to them in a timely manner. And as always, have a nice day. I'll see you next time.